Hello again, YouTube, and a special hello to the Peach. Long time no see. And I'm making a video response to the Peach's video about cultural appropriation, which was featured on the Breakfast Club channel. For those of you unfamiliar with the Breakfast Club channel, it is a channel in which various video bloggers trade off making videos on different subjects. If you want to check them out, there's a link in the description. Now, for this video on cultural appropriation, I figured I'd chime in with my 2 cents on what you were talking about. But I have to say that this might be one of those cases in which a white male takes things that other people have already said, repackages them, and then rearticulates them, and it's taken more seriously and given more credibility because a white male said it. You know, privilege is magic. So, without further ado, I will bring the audience up to speed by playing a clip.
This time, it's Miley Cyrus, and of all the fashion choices she could understandably be shamed for, people are instead picking on her for wearing a dreadlock weave at the MTV Video Music Awards, stating that she was committing the social crime of cultural appropriation because she's white. And white people are apparently not allowed to wear their hair in styles that are popular and traditional with people who aren't white. But then, does this not also translate to food, clothing, language, etc.? For example, are white people committing cultural appropriation when they enjoy traditional Chinese and Japanese cuisine, as both groups were specifically targeted for discrimination by the United States government in the past? Would this also include white people performing jazz, rock and roll, and hip-hop? Can they not become Buddhists, learn martial arts, or practice yoga without facing the same accusation? Are Western belly dancers making a mockery of traditional Raksun Cherokee? Is it in poor taste for little girls to get mehndi at their local fairs because they know nothing of Vedic rituals? Because if taken to its logical conclusion, there is so much in our daily communal culture that is not indigenous to the West and, by definition, would have to be off limits. Now, aside from the fact that dreadlocks is likely one of the oldest hairstyles in human history, as dreads are basically what occurs to hair when it is not groomed over a long period of time, it is most certainly not the sole possession of black people.
So with this issue of cultural appropriation, basically I feel like I'm of two minds. On one hand, I get what you're saying, that it doesn't really make sense to talk about a group owning a cultural practice like a hairstyle or a dance or a genre of music. And it also doesn't make sense to say that these sorts of cultural practices do and can only have one meaning. So you use the example of dreadlocks because that was relevant to the recent Miley Cyrus controversy. Another one I hear from time to time is tattooing, saying that sailors brought it back from Polynesia and other Pacific islands and made it popular again because tattooing has a millennia-old history in Europe, and so white people with tattoos is cultural appropriation because of that connection. But with those sorts of examples, I'm not really inclined to agree because they're broad cultural practices which appear in many different cultures and have multiple meanings. So somebody's Hello Kitty tattoo bears little resemblance to Polynesian tribal tattoos in spite of the similarity of, you know, embedding ink in subepidermal layers in order to form a permanent design in somebody's skin. Beyond the very basic, you know, fact of what's being done, there's very little cultural connection. It's superficial. The same with dreadlocks. They appear in lots of different cultures. Your hair will naturally dreadlock if you don't comb it, and so on. They can have multiple meanings, and it's not necessarily an affront to one group if another group does it, right? On the other hand, I don't think this is entirely baseless. And where I think that these accusations ring true is when you get into more specific cultural examples. This is one of those situations in which you look at a term like cultural appropriation, and it was clearly dreamed up by academia and not by somebody with an eye to marketing. If I were to relabel or rebrand this idea, I would call it exotic accessorizing. That is more phrased in a way that a marketer would dream up. To give a kind of oversimplified litmus test, I would put it this way. Is what is being taken from another culture truly being integrated into mainstream American society, or is it someone's exotic accessory? Something that they put on or practice to seem different, mysterious, exotic, etc. So you use the example of food, and in my opinion, Chinese food is pretty much as American as apple pie. And in fact, I used to work at a Thai restaurant, and a lot of these restaurants, these ethnic restaurants in America, are run by people of those ethnicities, and obviously they want white people to come eat their food because they're a business, right? I don't think that that kind of cultural exchange is damaging anybody, because it really is integrated into American society. If you say to somebody, hey, do you want to go out for some sushi? Do you want to go get Thai food? Do you want to go get whatever kind of food? No one's going to look at you like, what craziness are you talking about? But a lot of the sorts of things that you're talking about are completely normalized in America. Another obvious example would be coffee, all right? Coffee is something where in most American cities there's a Starbucks on every other block, and a large percentage of the population drinks coffee on a regular basis. There is nothing exotic about it, but it came from Ethiopia and the Arabian Peninsula. Most people don't even stop to think about that unless they look on their coffee tin, or, you know, Arabic coffee. Like, oh, there's some connection there. I'm sure a lot of people in America probably think that it originally came from South America, but that's not the case. Certain things have become completely integrated into, you know, mainstream white American society that nobody really thinks about their cultural origin. Nobody is looked at as strange for participating in it, or going to a Chinese restaurant isn't some weird thing that only those strange people with crazy foreign tastes do, right? It's perfectly normal. On the other hand, those damn hipsters with their Native American war bonnets at Coachella, well, then it's much easier to make a case that those people are using that as an exotic accessory, which is something completely different. It gets into what you talk about in a clip that I'll play in a minute here, in which you talk about how cultural appropriation seems to be the language of separatism and creates this otherness. But in certain cases, when people are using things as an exotic accessory, look at me dress up on this kimono, aren't I so different and exotic, right? They are perpetuating a kind of otherness. So let's stick with this example that I gave of the Native American war bonnet. Now, first of all, the fact that it's being used flippantly as a fashion accessory for hipsters at parties and music festivals is likely to be taken as offensive by people of the culture from which it originates, because within its own cultural context, it is a kind of a valor award, and it would be the equivalent of a hipster showing up to Coachella with a Medal of Honor and a Bronze Star as a fashion accessory. And beyond that, is it truly a part of American society? Would you get, you know, no stranger looks wearing one than you would walking down the street wearing a baseball cap? I don't think so. People would think that it's slightly odd. It's not normalized within American society. And to the extent that it is a part of mainstream white American society, it's as American as, well, racist old Western movies, where the heroic cowboys go out and fight the savage Indians, right? I mean, it is connected within mainstream American society to these racist caricatures of Native Americans. And I don't think that you can walk away from that any more than you can walk away from the connection between the Confederate flag and slavery. Throughout your video, Peach, you seem to make this argument that America is this broad multicultural society, this melting pot in which everyone shares everything, but I don't really think that that's the case. I think that there are oftentimes rather clear examples in which people display a kind of ignorance and cultural chauvinism, but I want to move on to some other points, so I'm going to play another video clip.
Now, moving on to some of the arguments that are made when accusing palefaces of appropriating culture in the form of hairstyles or clothing or music, is that when white people do it, it's always considered something new and cool. Furthermore, said white person is then attacked for not helping brown people. I'm not exactly sure how that logic follows, but it generally comes with a lot of baseless assumptions.
So here you're talking about this pattern within American society in which black people or some other ethnic group does something first and then white people rip it off, and it's this cultural recurring pattern. Now, I have to say that I don't think the problem here is with artists like Miley Cyrus or Elvis or Eminem, although they sometimes get attacked for cultural appropriation in these cases, as was this most recent case, but rather that the problem is within society itself. So let's go back to the 1950s and the popularization of rock and roll, and this is sort of my oversimplified impression of how rock music got popular, right? So, you know, radio DJ goes into the manager and he says, "Hey Jim, I just got this awesome new rock and roll record. We should totally play it on the radio." And then Jim's like, "No, Bob, we can't play it on the radio. Rock and roll's black music." "No, Jim, this is by a white artist." "A white artist, you say? This is going to be the biggest thing ever." You see just what happened in that scenario? That in art forms such as rock and roll, the blues, jazz, etc., these weren't things that were accepted on their own terms. It wasn't that black people created this form of music and then it got popular and those artists who created it got popular as a result of its popularity. That more explicitly in the case of rock and roll, there was this cultural barrier that it could not become popularized until it was made white by white artists. Now, does that sound like the way that it would work in an integrated multicultural society? I think we can both agree that the answer is no, right? And so jumping forward a bit in history to hip-hop, a white artist like Miley Cyrus can come along and incorporate images and style and sound from hip-hop and not really have to face the sort of stigma placed on hip-hop to the extent that it's associated with black culture. One of my all-time favorite music videos is Gangsta Rap Made Me Do It, and I'll post a link in that description. You should watch it. And at the beginning of the video, there's this Nazi-esque teacher up in front of the class talking about how the world was peaceful until gangsta rap came along and ruined everything, and this little kid says, "But wasn't Compton dangerous before gangsta rap?" And the teacher says, "Wrong! Compton was a nature preserve for bunnies!" It's hilarious, and I love that song as well. The chorus of the song, "Ain't nothing to it, gangsta rap made me do it." Every time I hear one of these right-wing pundits talk about how the problem is black culture, and it's that damn hip-hop music. And you know what? You want to know why there's these riots going on in Baltimore? And you want to know why this? And you want to know about crime and black incarceration? It's because that damn hip-hop music. You know, let's not look at racial bias within the justice system or law enforcement. Let's not look at the racist housing policies that created the American ghettos. Let's not look at, you know, the wealth disparity or any of these other things. Ain't nothing to it, gangsta rap made me do it, right? Within white mainstream society, hip-hop, rap, gangsta rap, these are very often presented as Exhibit A of why black culture is degenerate and has all these social problems, so they can brush aside the sort of anger that sparked things like the Baltimore riots or the riots in Ferguson. They don't want to have to look at the actual issues within society that are causing all of this anger, leading to these riots. Nope, it's that damn hip-hop music. Now, does Miley Cyrus, or just about any other white person who incorporates hip-hop music and style, have to face the stigma of being regarded as degenerate and ghetto by white right-wing America? Not really. No. At the end of the day, she's still a white girl from Tennessee, and she can take that costume off and conform to, you know, mainstream white society and say she found Jesus or something like that and be accepted back into the fold. Whereas people from marginalized groups really can't just set aside their culture and their identity and their skin color, their religion, their sexual orientation, so on, and conform to white society and be left alone. They still have to face, you know, the prejudice and the burden of, you know, the social stigma and the discrimination that goes on against them in society, whereas white people, they can play at being gangsta hip-hop, but they can also take that persona off and go back into conforming into white society. So at the very least, I can understand the resentment and the sense that they're being a poser when artists like Miley Cyrus try and go, you know, look how cool and hip-hop I am, by accessorizing themselves with hip-hop. But let me try and bring this all together now by playing one last clip from your video.
All of this cultural appropriation business is the language of separatists. It accomplishes nothing but to encourage division and to paint a picture of subcultures which are as American as obesity and mediocre versions of British comedies, as foreign and an other. And really now, how does that end up improving the experiences of minorities?
Now, I think that this clip gets to the heart of the issue because although I don't always agree with every example of so-called cultural appropriation, and as I said, I prefer my own rebranded, you know, marketer-esque term, exotic accessorizing, that when it is a problem, it's almost as if you have the situation backwards when it is a problem. So when someone takes something from another culture and wears it as an exotic accessory, whether they're literally wearing it or metaphorically wearing it, and they're presenting it as, look how strange and different and exotic this hairstyle, clothing style, you know, headdress, etc. is, they are increasing the otherness of people and other cultures, making them seem strange and foreign. I would contend that the mainstream of American society is still defined by the white majority, and that just because something has become fashionable does not mean that it has become normalized within society. Now, it's usually the case that when somebody mentions colonialism, somebody else retorts white guilt. Nonetheless, I'm reminded of an example, one of countless examples that I had to read about in a class. A woman that was called the Hottentot Venus. And this woman, how should I put it? She had a huge ass. She was from Africa, and she was essentially paraded around Europe as part of a freak show, more or less. You know, look at this exotic wonder from darkest Africa. And there are many other examples where cultures are presented to European or American culture as, you know, look at this exotic person, this exotic dress, this exotic practice, and it becomes maybe fashionable for a while, or people gawk at it, and it really maintains the position of other, rather than try and understand another culture from an anthropological perspective, or rather than have something become, you know, integrated into a society. It's becomes fashionable as exotic, which maintains the otherness of the people from which it originated. And to me, that's the crux of the problem, this exotic accessorizing or cultural appropriation, is that it in fact maintains the otherness of people from different cultures. To summarize, I basically think that American culture is not quite as open-minded, multicultural, and integrated as you're arguing that it is, and that cultural chauvinism is alive and well. Miley Cyrus having dreadlocks might not be the end of the world, but on the other hand, asking people to show some respect for other cultures and not be so willfully ignorant isn't exactly the unreasonable demands of radical separatists either. I think that there is some sense to be made of this whole issue of cultural appropriation. Can it be taken too far? Sure. Is there some merit to it? Certainly. And really, that's all I have for right now. Peach, maybe I'll hear back from you. That'd be cool. Maybe not. If not, have a good whatever time it is. Maybe next time I'm in Manhattan, we can go to the Guggenheim. And for everybody else, have a great whatever time it is.